Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined on this Thursday morning, Boxing Day, by Andrew Erickson and Pat Fitzmaurice. Fellas, Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to everybody listening and watching. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Happy, if you don't celebrate that, just time with families, or happy fantasy championship week. Whatever it is, we've got something to celebrate if you're watching this show. Fitz, how was your time with the family this week?
It was really good, Worm. A lot of family and a lot of food. Too much food. I feel like I've been feasting for the last week and really need to reintroduce fruit into my diet. And really the only fruit I've been consuming the last week has been in the form of red wine. So, I need to eat some pineapple or something.
That doesn't surprise me in the slightest. I believe one year your fantasy baseball team in the work league was wines above replacement. So that is no surprise to hear there. Erickson, how about you?
Very enjoyable. Lots of good drinks, good food, and a couple good fantasy decisions. Again, on my way to my Christmas Day party, and I forgot that I didn't set my lineup for the Wednesday matchups. And I have James Conner. He's banged up, but I'm like, I don't know if I could trust him. I have Xavier Worthy on the bench. So I'm driving. I get the wife on my phone. Right, hey, we got to update this lineup here. So it takes us like 15 minutes to get through it. But eventually we get Mahomes in the line. We get Worthy in the lineup. And then I pull in a little bit after 1 o'clock, check my phone, touchdown, Xavier Worthy. So absolutely felt great. And that's in my championship league. So off to a good start and looking to kind of come home with the ship come Monday night.
Yeah, that is a great way to kick things off. When you have that early, like extra early Wednesday game, obviously starting strong just puts you in a good mood for the rest of the weekend and the rest of the slate. Fitz, how are your title kind of setup looking? I've got 3 kind of relevant games going on still, 2 championships, 1 third place game that does have money on the line. What's your how spread out are you? Obviously whittled down throughout the course of the season from 20 leagues to 10 to what are you at now?
Yeah, so I've got 3 championship games in redraft leagues, 2 industry leagues, and 1 home league. And I think I'm ranging from a slight to a heavy favorite in all of them right now. But the main one and the one I want to win most is this home league. And I was going against Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers. And I feel very fortunate that the Texans weren't able to mount anything at all on offense whatsoever. And it kind of kept Lamar from going absolutely nuclear. He put up a big point total, but like it could have been so much more. And, Zay Flowers, like he had, I think, 31 yards on the first drive and then didn't catch another pass simply because he didn't need to. I mean, the Ravens were getting whatever they wanted with Lamar and Derrick Henry. So there was really no point to get Zay Flowers involved, fortunately for me.
Yeah, I'm facing our pal and colleague Mike Mayer in the title game of our Work Dynasty League, and he had Mahomes, so that was not a fun start to watch. But he also had Zay Flowers, so kind of evened out a bit there. We'll see how the rest of the week goes. All right, guys, this is our Thursday show. We're talking starts, we're talking sits, we're talking guys that we maybe added on waivers. If you're willing to start or sit them in the fantasy championship, and then we'll wrap up with touchdown calls as always. As a reminder, I've been reminding you all season, but now more than ever, if you're checking the rankings, all of our weekly consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. Hopefully those can help bring home a fantasy title. Hopefully we can help you guys bring home a fantasy title this week. We'll start with the waiver wire ads as usual. Not a ton of options. Also, if you're playing in the fantasy championship game, you're probably not relying on waiver pickups at this point anyway. So kind of a streamlined look here. The one guy I did want to bring up, and this is health depending, it's Trey Benson. He was the consensus number 1 pickup on our staff, waiver wire rankings and the great article that Fitz works on every week with Debro and Bo McBrayer. Trey Benson was kind of the number 1 guy. Clearly, again, this is going to be dependent both on his health, practicing in a limited capacity on Wednesday of this week, and also James Conner's health, obviously. So clearly, if either of those health goes in the wrong direction, you're not playing him. In a scenario where Trey Benson is the starter and James Conner is not playing in this game, Fitz, how interested are you in starting Trey Benson?
Yeah, I mean, if Conner is out and Benson does play, and obviously people are going to have to monitor this because both guys were limited on Wednesday. I don't know if that was an actual practice or a practice estimation, But, Benson did miss week 16 with an ankle injury. If it's a high ankle, pretty iffy whether he returns. But if he does, he'd be in line for a good amount of work against the Rams, who are sort of a neutral matchup. But just not ideal that the Cardinals just had to put both of their starting offensive tackles, Paris Johnson, their left tackle, and Jonah Williams, their right tackle, on injured reserve. Like, that is a problem for this Arizona offense. So I'm going to probably have Benson ranked somewhere in low-end RB2 range if he plays something like somewhere between RB21 and RB24.
What do you think, Erickson? Similar range for you?
I think it might be a little bit lower on Trey Benson. I don't know what the type of workload is going to be because he's also dealing with his own injury too. So we don't even know how healthy he's going to be. We know Michael Carter will end up being the complimentary back to whoever else is starting in this game. And right now, at least on the injury report, both guys are practicing in limited capacity. So we know James Conner's a warrior. The benefit to this is at least this game is on Saturday. So you're going to you're going to know about Trey Benson. So the only other players, I think I'd be comfortable starting Benson over I'm not touching this Broncos backfield, because Jalen McLaughlin's healthy again. So now you have a three-headed monster. I feel better about Trey Benson's workload potentially versus those three Denver Broncos guys. So that's the only decision I would probably wait up until the news about Trey Benson and James Conner. But I mean, I feel like I'm slotting him more in the Patrick Taylor. I think I'd rather start Patrick Taylor if Isaac Rendo's out. Patrick Taylor played 80% of the snaps last week. Yes, he didn't score a touchdown, but if he does, then you're feeling fine about the workload that he got. He's also playing against Detroit, and we know their defense has been eviscerated by injuries. So the Rams are up and down. The Cardinals' offense has just been so unreliable. And James Conner is really the only part that's kind of worked all year long. And they take him out of it. How does this offense even function at a high level? Trey Benson's not a one-for-one replacement for James Conner. So, I think I'm trying to stay away. And especially with the trends looking like Conner is probably going to play just because he's an absolute warrior. And both guys have been limited up to the Thursday practices.
The other kind of waiver wire approach I wanted to look at for this week, for this segment, is I just want to have you guys pick kind of your favorite available defense/special teams for week 17. This is a week that I know, I do this in all of my leagues where I'm, in a position for the 1 seed, or I have an extra bench spot where a couple of weeks ahead of time, I'm picking up defenses early for week 17 just to have whoever's facing, earlier in the year, it looked like it would be whoever's facing the Panthers. So the Bucks, or, at this time of year, maybe it's the Giants. Who is the DST Fitz that you are looking at this week as I want to pick this team up and help them, help me get a championship?
So I want to get either the Colts against the Giants and Drew Lock, who had 2 pick sixes last week, or the Dolphins against the Browns and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. But both of those defenses are they're rostered in about half of Yahoo leagues and probably more in leagues where where everyone is really dialed in. So of the widely available defenses, let me endorse the Las Vegas Raiders. And they have not been a good fantasy defense. I think they're bottom 3 in defensive fantasy scoring. And that was with superstar edge rusher Max Crosby, who is out for the rest of the year. But what we saw from the New Orleans Saints Monday night against the Green Bay Packers, I know the Raiders are not as good defensively as the Packers are, but this Saints offense is just completely toothless without Derek Carr. And it looks like it's going to be Spencer Rattler at quarterback this week to target the New Orleans offense with the Raiders defense.
Erickson, what do you think? Who's your DST du jour for the week?
Yeah, I like the points that Fitz brought up. I think definitely the du jour is the Dolphins and Colts. I think those are the top 2. But if they're not available, the Raiders, I'm just kind of looking at their game logs and talking about how, yes, they're not a great defense. They don't have a lot of good players. But when you look at, they have 3 top 10 finishes this year against the Browns, against the Buccaneers, and against the Falcons, right? So it's really been more about, well, who do they play in those certain scenarios, not how good their defense actually is. So I co-sign on the Raiders pick there. The one that I like a lot that's also kind of under-owned, I'm looking at our waiver wire rankings, 23% owned is the Tennessee Titans. So they're playing on the road against the Jaguars, but you have Mac Jones as the quarterback. And we've already seen the Titans play the Jaguars a couple weeks ago, and they were the 5th ranked defense that week. So they finished with 9 fantasy points, and they only gave up 10 points on offense. On defense. So I like the Tennessee Titans as an option. I think also we're potentially looking at weather in that game in Jacksonville, so not like cold, but rainy conditions. So with just two bad quarterbacks going at it like that, in an environment where you're creating turnovers and you're not too concerned about, oh, well, the Jaguars are going to put up 30 points on this defense. It's probably not likely going to happen. The divisional game, usually much tighter. So I think the Titans, and I do want to say, again, you talked about defenses you like. I think you want to avoid, another defense that's kind of been in our rankings is Tampa Bay, right? So they're playing Carolina, and I've seen a lot of people look at them as a potential option. I would not want them as my defense. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense is bad, number one, and they've already faced Carolina earlier this year, and they were not a good match. They scored 3 fantasy points. So I know that in the aggregate, Carolina, great defense to target. Bryce Young has been playing much better. And again, we saw this matchup already played out. And this game was a shootout between the Panthers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that's something that I would try to avoid. I would go with the Raiders over the Buccaneers. I would go with the Titans over the Buccaneers. So again, another team that's kind of out there that might look good on paper. I don't like them as much as some of these other teams we've talked about.
Let's plant our flags on some players here for the final time this season. By the way, just a bit of housekeeping. We're not going to have this show next week for week 18 just because so many leagues are already done. We will have other shows throughout the week. So there will be conversations about that slate of games, and we'll look at it from, if you are playing, maybe who are some players that have incentives to try and hit that we're going to be keeping an eye on, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So there will be shows next week, just not this start sit show in particular. So for the final time this season, Fitz, who are you planting your flag on?
It's sort of a conditional flag plant, Worm, but I'm going to put it on Devonta Smith. And it's conditional upon Jalen Hurts being able to play this week after sustaining a concussion in week 16. But Devonta Smith had an egregious fourth quarter drop that basically cost the Eagles their game against the Washington Commanders last week. I think if Hurts plays, Devonta Smith will make up for it this week against the Cowboys.
Erickson, what do you think about Smith this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good spot for him against the Dallas Cowboys. And yeah, he should be motivated, right? He kind of left his team out to dry in the last week's game. And look, we've seen Smith again. It's weird this year because the Eagles have just been so run heavy, but traditionally Devonta Smith has been a locked and loaded wide receiver 2 or better in games where Dallas Goedert doesn't play. So I think that he has a really high ceiling. And yeah, I like this play here as long as Hurts is ready to go. And I think that they're gonna find a way to get him to clear the concussion protocol. So
sticking with you, Erickson, who are you planting your flag on?
The guy I talked about on the prediction show earlier in the week, J.K. Dobbins. I think that he's going to play. I think he's going to play in week 17. I think he's going to run all over the New England Patriots defense because I think this Patriots defense, I watch them every single week. They are terrible. They can't tackle. They can't stop the run. They can't stop the pass. The only enjoyable part about Patriots games is watching Drake May be awesome. That is literally it because their defense is so bad. 9 of the last 11 running backs they have faced have gone over their rushing yards projection, including 86 plus yards in 3 of their last 4 games. And J.K. Dobbins, man, even at like 75%, that dude has more juice than Gus Edwards. I'm sorry. Like the Gus Bus ripping off a 40-yard run for the first time in his career, it seems like on Thursday night a couple weeks ago. He's also a little bit banged up on the injury report this week. So I don't think the Chargers have a choice, right? They need explosiveness on offense. And Dobbins, he's looked good. It seems like I've read some of the practice reports. I was like, hey, he's looking good. He's moving around. He looks fine. He's good to go. So again, they've designated him from return from IR. He hasn't officially been activated, I don't believe, for this game, but this is the first game on Saturday. So you're going to get to know, hey, he's ready to go. I don't think that he's going to be held back. I think that he's going to get at least double-digit touches, and that's more than enough to get it done against the New England Patriots. So if I have Dobbins, I'm trying to find a way to get him in my lineup as just at least as like a flex play. I like him a lot more like a Trey Benson scenario where, Connor's out. I would rather start J.K. Dobbins in that kind of head-to-head.
What do you think, Fitz? A, do you think Dobbins is going to play based on everything you've seen? Both he and Edwards were limited in practice on Wednesday. And B, if he is playing, where are you going to rank him?
Yeah, this is kind of a tricky one. I don't know what the Chargers' strategy is going to be for the return of Dobbins. Maybe Erickson is right, and they just throw him right back into that lead role. I guess I'm not quite as confident that he walks right back into 15 to 20 touches. And I think it could be sort of a messy committee situation with Dobbins, Gus Edwards, a little Kamani Vidal sprinkled in. So not quite as confident. And I would probably have him ranked in like mid-range running back 3 territory if he does indeed play.
It is the most wonderful time of the year for getting in on all of the hoops, football, and hockey action at DraftKings Sportsbook. In the season of giving, we're being gifted college football and basketball, pro football and basketball, and pro hockey to almost 24/7. So many games every day, so many opportunities to place your first bet. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and place your bet. We've got some hugely important matchups this week, including Broncos-Bengals on Saturday, Cincy laying 3.5 points at home in a critical game for the AFC playoff picture. Also, the second highest total of the week. Vikings-Packers is also a fantastic matchup this week. Minnesota was laying just a single point at home earlier in the week. Lines and odds are subject to change on those games, but they look like terrific matchups here in week 17. And here's a gift for all new customers. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Happy holidays from DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, fellas, let's do some start-sit player debates. We'll start with the running backs as usual. Erickson, how about Rachaad White or Rico Dowdle this week?
I'm going to play Rachaad White. I think that the Carolina Panthers defense is one that multiple running backs can get home against. We've already seen this matchup before. Rachaad White was very productive against the Panthers the last time they played. Yes, is he still the 1B in this backfield to Bucky? Yes, especially after he fumbled last week, but he still catches passes, and that's something that Rico Dowdle, even in his bell cow role, like his receiving usage hasn't been like fantastic with Cooper Rush under center, and then you just have the general matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles, arguably the best defense in the NFL. Dowdle didn't have a great game the last time that he faced the Eagles. Again, the role was a little bit different, but I think that White's role is still good enough, given just how great the matchup is against the Panthers, to give me the slight edge over Dowdle here.
Fitz, what do you think about this one?
So it's really close. I have them back-to-back in my rankings, but I do have Rico one spot higher at RB17, White at RB18. I know Rico kind of flopped last week, and I know the matchup with the Eagles is not exactly a red carpet matchup. This is going to be a tricky one. But over his last 5 games, Rico has averaged 19.4 carries, 21.4 touches, and 112 scrimmage yards per game. He has been getting bell cow usage, and he was not the last time he played the Eagles. So I kind of throw that result out the window. White is obviously sharing a backfield with Bucky Irving. He usually gets somewhere between like 10 and 17 touches a game. Not bad. Since the Buccaneers week 11 bye, Rachaad White has averaged 14.2 touches, 75 scrimmage yards a game. Not bad at all. Gets the best possible matchup against the Panthers, but it just comes down to rankings philosophy for me, Worm, and I always give more weight to workload than to matchup. When I'm putting together running back rankings every week, usage is my North Star, and I just follow it in most cases, no matter what. And just the fact that he is probably going to get about 6 or 7 more touches than Rachaad White, even though he has the much tougher matchup, I would rather go with the guy getting those extra touches.
Given the matchup and the fact that he's coming off this really poor game in week 16, Fitz, what is your emotional and confidence level when starting Rico Dowdle? When you're sitting there for the actual fantasy championship, knowing he's facing the Eagles, knowing he's coming off this game where he had just 23 rushing yards, how are you feeling mentally sliding him into your starting spot?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be wishing he had an easier matchup. That's for sure. Like, he faced Carolina not long ago. I would be wishing I had that matchup for Rico Dowdle because, Rico in a good matchup would be just, you'd feel all the confidence in the world. You can't really feel that going against the Eagles, but, this Dallas offense has been competent with Cooper Rush at quarterback. So I don't feel bad about it at all.
Let's go to another running back debate here. Erickson, Brian Robinson, who I know you talked about earlier in the week as somebody you expect to bounce back, or Jerome Ford, who's stepped right into the lead, running back in this backfield with Nick Chubb on the shelf.
Yeah, I'm going back to Brian Robinson. He was someone I talked about in the prediction show, someone I think could go over 100 yards from scrimmage, score a touchdown against the Falcons. I think the matchup is much better. Again, he's not facing the Eagles this week. The Falcons, I think, against some of the better competition, have shown a vulnerability against running backs. 8 of the last 11 running backs to face Atlanta have gone over their rushing yards projection. Now, they've looked better on paper over the last couple weeks, But a lot of that I'm chalking up to, well, they've had a lot of softer match. I mean, like they're playing the New York Giants, right? Like, are you expecting this Giants offense to run all over them? Probably not. So even as bad as last week was, again, he fumbled twice, 10 carries for 24 yards. He still was involved in the passing game, caught 2 or 3 targets for 17 yards, still played a great snap share, 63% of the snaps. He just didn't get the touchdown, right? He went over 3 rushing in the red zone. So if he had scored last week, he would have bailed you out with the touchdown. You wouldn't feel nearly as bad. But I think that the Commanders' role here, they're playing at home against the Falcons. Defense overall is a unit that I'm not inspired by in any way, shape, or form, especially their pass defense. So if Jaden Daniels is moving the ball effectively and he's not throwing for 5 touchdowns, well, the touchdowns are going to go towards Brian Robinson here. So without Austin Eckler, I think that his role is still underrated as a workhorse in this backfield. And I think that he bounces back. I mean, again, like we've seen this is a real life thing, right? Like he left his team. He did not help his team last week at all. Like fumbled twice, was not effective, but I think that he bounces back here. So I'm going to go with Brian Robinson. And just the thing with Ford is last week he had the massive run, like right from the get-go, but we've just seen this offense, like the potential for it to crumble with DTR as the quarterback. And now they're talking about like Bailey Zappi as you do not want Bailey Zappi anywhere near your starting line. Again, I watched him all last year with the New England Patriots. It is something you don't want any parts of when that guy is taking snaps under center. So that's the only thing I'm afraid of with Ford. Even though, yes, Ford evolved more as a pass catcher, explosive. DTR can just destroy an entire offense, and especially with Zappi, I'm very concerned about the floor bottoming out with Ford. Where Brian Robinson, I feel much better about his floor.
Did you say how wide a gap you have between these two guys in your rankings?
No, I did not. I have Robinson RB16 and Ford RB25. So it's pretty significant. I think it's probably just much higher on Brian Robinson than ECR. I'd probably have to guess. And then Ford, I'm probably a little bit lower on ECR. So
it's more that you're lower on Ford than high on Robinson.
Okay.
Robinson, you're fairly close to the way ECR currently looks here as of Thursday morning. But Ford, you're several spots lower. Fitz, how do you see this one?
Yeah, I've got him much closer than Erickson does, and I've actually got Ford ranked higher, RB20 versus RB21. I do love Erickson's enthusiasm for Brian Robinson since I'm starting him in 2 championship games this week.
You actually survived to the championship with Brian Robinson on your team?
I did, twice. So, yes, I feel fortunate because he definitely did not help me get to the championship game last week. Yeah, this one is tough. So Ford had 11 carries and 5 catches last week. And as Erickson pointed out, he had the big day, 131 scrimmage yards and a touchdown, but he got almost half of those scrimmage yards on that first quarter, 66-yard run. But he did play 80% of Cleveland's offensive snaps. Like he is the guy and he gets dual run catch usage. I don't hate the outlook for Robinson. I don't love that the Falcons have only allowed 4 rushing touchdowns to running backs all year. That's tied with the Chargers for second fewest, I believe. Tied with the Chargers for the fewest. And the 2 fumbles last week, that does kind of concern me because I feel like if Robinson puts another one on the ground, it's gonna cost him playing time. Like I would not be surprised if that meant more Chris Rodriguez and Jeremy McNichols. So not an easy matchup for either of these guys. I mean, Miami's run defense has been pretty tough too of late, but I feel slightly better about Ford despite the quarterback situation in Cleveland.
Fitz, let's stick with you for our first wide receiver debate here. How about Garrett Wilson or Jauan Jennings? Who would you prefer for week 17?
Oh, this is going to be a fun debate because I know Erickson is he might be the highest of any ranker on Jauan Jennings this week. And I think I'm one of the lowest on Jauan Jennings. I've got Jennings wide receiver 31 and Garrett Wilson wide receiver 23. I think I'm pretty much in line with consensus on Wilson. Everyone knows the story with him. Terrific player, but he has become the Jets' number 2 receiver, taking sort of a backseat to Davante Adams. But it is worth noting that Adams either missed practice or was an estimated missed practice this week. I'm not sure what his malady is. I can't remember. But if Adams wound up being scratched, this is a no-brainer. But for me, this is mostly about Jennings. Like, I just think Jennings' enthusiasm has maybe reached the tipping point. He's proven this year he's a really good receiver, but I don't think he's quite the star he has been anointed to be by rankers. And yes, he's had some really big games this year, but Jennings has also had 56 or fewer receiving yards in 4 of his last 5 games. The San Francisco offense has sort of lost the plot over the last 6 weeks. They've scored 17 or fewer points in 5 of their last 6 games. The one exception, big game for Jennings, 38-point outburst against the Chicago Bears. But it just seems like kind of a dubious proposition to me that the 49ers are going to all of a sudden get it together on offense when they have been eliminated from the playoffs and are not going to get star left tackle back Trent Williams for the rest of the year. So I do worry about this offense as a whole. Yes, the Detroit Lions defense is really banged up, but it's still a pretty good defense to me. So I don't know. I'm not as enthusiastic about Jen. I'm like a dozen rankings spots behind consensus on him. I think his ECR is like, what is it, wide receiver 19? Something like that?
I think it's 20. Yeah, it's wide receiver 20.
20. So I'm down to 31.
Yeah, like to that point, you guys are actually both very in line with consensus on Garrett Wilson. He's wide receiver 24. In ECR, Jennings is the one where it makes this an interesting debate because you are so much lower, Fitz, and Erickson, you are so much higher on Jennings.
Yeah, I have wide receiver 12, so I want to start Jauan Jennings because when I'm just looking at the quarterback wide receiver combinations, Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers don't have the chemistry that Jennings and Brock Purdy have shown all year long. Like, I get that last week it was more the Debo popped off, George Kittle popped off, the bigger game, but that's just what happens with these 49ers receivers sometimes. Like, Jennings is really, like, the whole year, Jennings for me has been the guy that I wanted Brandon Ayuk to be. And like, he's in that role where you have these massive games every once in a while, but sometimes, you know, the other guys get to eat. And last week was the first time we saw Deebo Samuel eat at all in over like a 6-month period or a 6-week period where Jauan Jennings, I think, has been the way more consistent of the 49ers top receivers. And look, week 14 against the Bears, like, he had a 25-point game. That was 3 weeks ago. He was a wide receiver 5. So like, that wasn't that long ago. The Rams game, throw it out because of the rain. And in that game, he still had 9 targets. So he still led the team in targets in that game. Last week, again, 4 for 51. But I chalked that up to, well, Kittle popped off and Deebo Samuel popped off. Sometimes not all the receivers are going to pop off in the offense. And yet he still had 81 air yards. He still led the team with a 45% air yard share. So this is just the classic case of, hey, like, if this had been Brandon Ayuk in the exact same situation, I'd be like looking to buy him against the Lions defense that has just been so injured all over the place. Every team is scoring points against them. I think it's going to be a shootout. I mean, the 49ers, one thing they can do is play on offense, right? I still think they can score points. I like Brock Purdy a lot in this matchup playing at home. So I like going right back to Jauan Jennings. He has a ton of upside this year. I mean, that's what he's done all year. He has 3 top 10 finishes, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 8, wide receiver 5. And Garrett Wilson, I mean, every time this guy talks about his role with the team, he's like, I don't know if I want to be here now. Like, he just seems so checked out. And I can guarantee, you know, Aaron Rodgers' 500th touchdown pass of the regular season is not going to Garrett Wilson. like he's not throwing it to Garrett Wilson, whereas Jennings has been Brock Purdy's guy more often than not this season. So I want to chase the upside with a matchup against the Detroit Lions versus Garrett Wilson, where I'm like hoping that Rodgers like just give this guy a couple targets, like, please. Where I think that's going to happen much easier for Jauan Jennings. So maybe it's not wide receiver 12, but I definitely like him more than Garrett Wilson.
Let's go to another receiver debate where you guys are actually pretty aligned on one of these names and then pretty far apart on the other. Courtland Sutton or CeeDee Lamb? Fitz, we'll start with you. Who do you prefer this week?
Yeah, this could be a realistic decision for some people with really good wide receiver cores going into the championship week. So I've got Lamb wide receiver 8 and Sutton wide receiver 14. Maybe I am too high on Lamb. The shoulder injury he's been playing with is kind of a concern. He's been wincing in pain pretty much every time he gets tackled. And Lamb has a tough matchup against the Eagles, who held him to 6 catches for 21 yards back in week 10. But I don't think I need to make the case that CeeDee Lamb is a phenomenal football player. He and Cooper Rush have been clicking lately. Over his last 3 games, Lamb has 22 catches for 314 yards and 2 touchdowns, wide receiver 7 in fantasy scoring over the last 3 weeks. So no issues with Sutton. Only 82 receiving yards the last 2 weeks, but he's in a nice bounce back spot in a potential shootout against the Bengals. I just feel a little bit better about Lamb this week.
Erickson, how do you see this one?
So I again, like you said, me and Fitz basically have Sutton in the same spot. I am just lower on CeeDee Lamb this week because, look, a lot of his box score stuff, like his upside is attached to him catching a touchdown, right? Last week, he had 7 catches for 105 yards. At half PPR, that was wide receiver 20 because he didn't score a touchdown. He's playing with this shoulder injury. The Cowboys are out of the playoffs, and I know that he's a warrior, but he barely played in the second half of last week's game. So what if he pulls up on his shoulder, like, I'm out, coach, I can't play? Then you're left holding a dud in your lineup. Like, that's what concerns me the most about Lamb, because one kind of tweak with his shoulder is like, coach, I can't go. And then you're left with a player that doesn't score any fantasy points for you when you could have started Courtland Sutton in a matchup against the Bengals, which is like, hey, this could be a shootout. Sutton's been really consistent, again, down the last couple of weeks. But if there's ever a matchup they need him in, it's in a game where they're going to be catching points where Bo Nix, sorry, Bo, like, you can't check the ball down to running backs. Like, you got to throw the ball downfield because we're down by 21 points. Like, you got to chuck it. So I think Sutton has a much higher floor than Lamb does. And this has been what I've been afraid about with Lamb this entire season. Like, this whole Cooper Rush experience, right? Is like a lot of good matchups the last couple of weeks against the Panthers, against the Buccaneers. But I kept looking at that matchup week 17 against the Eagles and being like, this is where I'm terrified of playing Cooper Rush as a streaming quarterback. He's had a lot of better matchups, which is reflected in Lamb's box score as well, like Bengals, Panthers, Bucks, Giants. Like, those are the teams that he's played the last 4 weeks. Those are all good matchups for quarterbacks and wide receivers at Philadelphia. And like Fitz said, we've already seen this matchup play out. And he had 21 receiving yards on 6 catches. So that really terrified. I just can't. I don't feel confident with Lamb. I'm too afraid of him totally dudding out and potentially taking himself out of the game based on this shoulder injury that he's been dealing with, which we saw last week where he barely played in the second half. So I just feel so much better about the combination with Sutton and his floor.
Just quickly, I want to ask on Sutton, just because he's also back-to-back in ECR with Tyreek Hill, another guy who was a first-round pick in a lot of drafts, that I think this is a very realistic decision somebody would have to make. Fitz, would you rather, just quickly, Tyreek Hill or Courtland Sutton this week?
Tyreek Hill. They're back-to-back for me in my rankings, but you know, like Sutton, we have seen some floor games for Sutton too. The last 2 weeks, that mysterious 0 target game against New Orleans back in mid-season, where he got no targets, no catches on a Thursday night. So, yeah, I mean, I do feel generally good about Sutton, but we have seen the occasional inexplicable disappearance from him.
He hasn't been higher than wide receiver 24 since week 12, for whatever it's worth, Courtland Sutton. There was a bye week in there, of course. Erickson, Tyreek Hill, or Courtland Sutton?
If Jalen Waddle doesn't play, I've got to play Tyreek Hill. Like, he's too involved, especially when Waddle doesn't play, and Waddle hasn't been practicing. So, yeah, probably Hill for me.
Want to remind everybody that we have a special offer for you all. You can unlock a month of Betting Pros Premium for free. Download the Betting Pros app today. Use promo code FPFREE. That's promo code FPFREE. Get access to tools like the Same Game Parlay tool, the Prop Bet Analyzer, and the Prize Picks Prop Bet Cheat Sheet. Don't miss out. Try it free for 1 month now, available on iOS and Android. Again, that's promo code FPFREE for a month of Betting Pros Premium. All right, guys, let's go to the rapid fire start sit decisions here. Another running back question. I wanted to include, it's almost the 2024 season memorial rapid fire question, because these guys appeared pretty much every week. They were constant headaches to decide if we were starting them or not. So I'm going to put them against each other. Tank Bigsby or Javonte Williams. Erickson, who do you got?
You know, when I called Travis Etienne touchdown last week, I knew that Tank Bigsby was definitely going to score instead. And that's exactly what happened. So I'm going with the Tank, man. I would rather, try to figure out a 2-man backfield between Tank and Travis Etienne versus a 3-man. Because now that Jaleel McLaughlin is practicing in full, I want no part of this Broncos backfield. Again, both guys have, I think, good matchups. The Titans run defense we've seen get truck sticked over the last month or so. And that includes a matchup against the same Jaguars where Jacksonville really leaned on Tank Bigsby, 18 carries for 55 yards. So this is a matchup that Jacksonville knows, hey, we can run the ball here with Tank Bigsby kind of leading the charge. Whereas Denver, I mean, Sean Payne doesn't even probably know what he's going to be doing yet. Like, he talked up Estime. Yeah, he's done that before, and I fell for it before, and it didn't work. So I'm just going to roll with Tank Bigsby. That's the guy I feel most confident about. Again, a lot of ambiguous backfields here, even in week 17, of course. But I'm going to roll out the Tank here.
Fitz?
So as of now, I've got Javonte ranked slightly higher than Tank. But if Jaleel McLaughlin does play, I will probably wind up having Tank ranked slightly higher. Granted, they are both going to be low-end running back twos, and I would kind of dread having to start either of these guys. But at least we can say about Bigsby that he has had double-digit targets in 3 straight games, and he's a matchup against a Tennessee Titans defense that let Jonathan Taylor run for approximately 700 yards last week. So, I can only generate so much enthusiasm for a running back who splits work in a mediocre offense and doesn't catch passes. But I still think I'll be a little bit more enthusiastic for Tank Bigsby than I would for Javonte Williams in a 3-headed backfield that's been wildly unpredictable all season.
Let's do a wide receiver debate here. How about Jordan Addison or Calvin Ridley? Fitz, sticking with you.
Oh, man, I have no issues with Addison. I have him right on the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 border. Wide receiver 25 is where I have him ranked. Terrific player, but there are just going to be weeks where you get a Justin Jefferson week. And we saw that last week. Addison had only 35 receiving yards, but he did score a touchdown to sort of bail out his fantasy managers. But I want to capitalize on Ridley's matchup against the Jaguars, who have allowed the 4th most receiving yards to receivers and the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers. Ridley had just sort of an okay game against the Jaguars a few weeks ago, 7 catches for 59 yards, but he did have 12 targets, his second highest target total of the season. Just no reason to think he won't be the number 1 target for Mason Rudolph this week against the Jaguars. I think there's smash potential for Calvin Ridley this week.
Erickson, how do you see it?
I think that both guys are good, like wide receiver 3 flex plays this week. I think you see upside cases with both of them. I still lean with Addison just because, I mean, even with Jefferson, with Hawkinson, like the guy's been just on fire. Like every single week, it seems like, even like last week when it's like a Jefferson game, he still puts up a decent stat line where you're not, oh man, he just killed me, 5 catches, 35 yards, but he scores a touchdown, right? So like he still like gets it done for you even when it's not his game. And I look at this matchup, Green Bay, Minnesota. Okay, like I like a lot of these offenses here. Like we know Minnesota unlocks like kind of some shootout potential with the opposing quarterback. The Green Bay Packers have really not had to force Jordan Love to throw in a lot of their past matchups because they've been facing really soft defenses in terms of against the run. Well, this is a matchup where you could actually see more projected volume from Jordan Love. So maybe it's a little bit more back and forth. Again, this is a rematch from week 4 where Jordan Addison was the wide receiver 4 on the week and half PPR. So he already has a top 5 finish against the same Packers defense. So I think I still like Addison. And the only thing I'll push back about with Ridley is, well, the last 2 weeks with Mason Rudolph, it's been Chigakonkwo. Like he has been the number 1 target in this offense when it comes to total volume. And it seems like him and Mason Rudolph are kind of clicking a little bit. And Jaguars, yes, bad against receivers, also very bad against tight ends. So again, Ridley has just been so inconsistent this year where I think I do feel a little bit more about Addison, but I do think that in most cases you were trying to start both of these players. Again, Ridley still inside my top 30, still very much in startable range. But Addison, I just think his body of work this year, I feel more confident with Sam Darnold as his quarterback and maybe a game script environment I like a little bit more than Jags Titans, which is the epitome of Thursday night football being played on a Sunday.
Yeah. Let's do some flex plays here. Erickson, how about Jakobi Meyers or Rhamondre Stevenson?
I like Jakobi here. I get that Meyers is coming off a down game, but for the most part, he's been a pretty strong play with Aiden O'Connell or just anybody not named Desmond Ridder as a quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders this season. He's playing the New Orleans Saints. They're playing in a dome, so you're not worried about any type of weather conditions. So I like Meyers. And Rhamondre it's just the boom bust potential with him. Right, the Chargers are a defense that don't stack the box, but does that matter when it comes to, well, if Stevenson puts the ball on the ground again, like you're left holding the bag because it's really annoying Gerard Mayo that Stevenson keeps fumbling. And it's one thing to point that out because Antonio Gibson also fumbles too. So it's very hard to project what this backfield's going to look like because both running backs have the propensity to put the ball on the ground and on the turf, which is really concerning. Rhamondre is definitely a tough guy to look at because I think that if you had picked a different receiver, I think I would have gone in Rhamondre's direction, maybe someone that I've ranked a little bit lower. But Meyers particular, like what he offers to the table, I think I feel better about his floor. Whereas Stevenson, he's had some ceiling games here and there, but if he doesn't score, like, I'm just not as confident about his role. And like I said, if he fumbles again, it's over. It's over for him. Like, he's going on the bench, and you better believe, like, Harbaugh knows, like, hey, this guy's has a fumbling issue. He's coaching up his guys, like, hey, get the ball from Stevenson, like, and then he's going to be out of the game. So Meyers, to me, even though he had a down week last week, he's been very consistent for the most part. So I like Meyers.
You said you might have gone in a different direction if it was a different receiver. Do any receivers come to mind that you would highlight that you would have taken Rhamondre over?
Probably if you listen to any Colts receivers, I've probably been like, that's easy. I'll take Rhamondre over the Colts receivers.
Jaden Reed.
Yeah, only if like Christian Watson doesn't play, but I don't even know, man. Like, they just feed Wicks every time Watson misses games. So I think Rhamondre probably over Jaden Reed too.
Wicks did have a big game the last time they played the Vikings.
Yeah. Fitz, who do you like better between Rhamondre and Jakobi Meyers?
I'm with Erickson here. I would prefer Jakobi. I know he had the bad game last week, but it was kind of an anomaly. He only had 5 targets. That was his lowest target total since week 2. He has had at least 9 targets in all but 3 of his last 11 games. So the volume is usually there, target volume, catch volume for Jakobi, and the Saints don't have a good cornerback on their roster. Like, this is not a matchup to be feared at all. Rhamondre's ceiling is just so low these days. He has not had more than 74 rushing yards in a game since early October. His last touchdown, he had a touchdown last week, but that was his first one since early November. Not catching many passes these days, and then, all this is without even mentioning the fumble problem. And the matchup against the Chargers, I mean, they've allowed the 7th fewest fantasy points to running backs. Yeah, I'm all about Jakobi here.
Let's go to actually one that has one of those Colts receivers in this question, Erickson, Josh Downs or Patrick Taylor, who a lot of people were excited about last week as just the next in line for the 49ers, a running back factory, plug right in and going to get the goal line work and yada, yada, yada. Didn't do anything. Just a couple of points. I know hurt me in a couple of leagues. So would you rather go back to the well with Taylor or start Josh Downs this week?
I would go back to Patrick Taylor. I know that we got to make sure that Isaac Randall's not playing, and they're playing on Monday night, so it's a little bit more of you got to kind of wait it out here to see because you need Taylor within that role. Because I don't think the role was that terrible. Like, he had goal line opportunity, he had some red zone opportunities, just didn't cash them in. But he still played 80% of the snaps, right? So it should be a game where the 49ers offense can put up points. And these Colts receivers, yes, the Giants defense, as I talked about on the prediction show, like, the thing that they're worst about is defending the deep ball. I mean, you got a 25% chance of projecting which Colts receiver catches the deep pass from Richardson, right? So it could be Pierce, could be Mitchell, could be Pittman, it could be Downs. Like, Downs probably has the best odds of just seeing the most targets, but last week, obviously, he scored the long touchdown to do it 2 weeks in a row. That's something I don't like betting on necessarily with Taylor. I feel much better about his workload. Again, the 49ers offense is going to score points against Detroit, and I think Taylor could benefit. Again, if he had scored a touchdown last week, we wouldn't be as down on him, I don't think. So Patrick Taylor for me.
Who do you like, Fitz?
Yeah, Taylor, if he is the guy. But I will have whoever is the lead running back for the 49ers, whether it's Isaac Guerendo or Patrick Taylor Jr., ranked probably ahead of Downs in the flex ranking. I'm going to have the lead 49ers back ranked as a mid-range wide running back 3, and I don't have any Indianapolis pass catcher ranked inside the top 40 at wide receiver. I don't want to start any Colts receiver at all with Anthony Richardson. And I like Anthony Richardson, but I like him more first running than first passing. So give me the 49ers running back, whoever it is.
Let's go to Jameson Williams, big touchdown last week, or Tyjae Spears. Fitz, I'll start with you on this one.
Conditional. I would play Jameson Williams if Tony Pollard plays for the Titans. I would play JMO over Spears, but I would start Spears if Pollard is out for this game. I do think Spears is playable even if Pollard does play. And in fact, I will be using Spears in a flex spot in one of my championship games. JMO is he's a little boomer bust every week. And, but like, Spears, if he's getting a majority share of touches in that backfield. Like, I absolutely want him over the, hit or miss Jameson Williams. But, Spears is going to be pretty hit or miss himself if he's sharing the backfield with Pollard this week.
Erickson?
Yeah, I agree with Fitz. It's tough. Like you really wish that Pollard just wouldn't play so we could just play Spears, because we know that he's like set up really well, but Pollard doesn't ever practice and he always plays, right? So it's like every single week, DNP. It doesn't matter because he always ends up playing, and then we don't always get a healthy Tony Pollard. Like last week, he was like dealing with the ankle thing, and then you saw Spears get the goal line touches, so that's like super frustrating. But we can't. I mean, I don't have the confidence to like, oh well, even if they're both active, I'm going to rank Spears ahead of Pollard because, well, I think that he's the healthier back, because I don't know that, right? And when you look at Pollard in his contract, he has a bunch of contract incentives that he wants to hit to get a bigger payout. And there's 2 weeks left in the season. Obviously, the Titans aren't playing for anything, but Pollard is playing for money, and the coaches know that too. So I think he's going to try to get onto the field and play. And I think that unfortunately makes it just tough to push the button on Spears, because yes, Spears got the touchdowns last week. Well, what if it goes to Pollard this week, and then you're left kind of holding the bag? Whereas Jamo, I mean, we saw last week, I mean, the upside he can deliver on one play, like with his explosiveness, and the 49ers defense has not been nearly as good as it's been in years past. Again, I was so wrong about Detroit last week, and like, oh, this game's going to go under. It's like, never again. All the overs with the Detroit Lions. I'm not looking to fade. I get they're playing outdoors, but San Francisco, as long as we're not getting another monsoon like that Thursday night game, just like, please check the weather. It should be fine temperatures for this Detroit Lions offense to cook here. So I like Jamo. Again, Jamo could be the guy that you need on a Monday night that wins you your championship, right? Like, oh, I'm down by 20. Like, you got Jamo.
Yeah.
He pops up a big play, and like you're popping the champagne with Jameson Williams because he got your championship. So for the fun element of it, you got to go Jamo.
Fitz, if you go into Monday night down, let's say 12.5 points, and you have Jameson Williams left and your opponent has nobody, are you feeling good? Or are you feeling
Are you already buying
bad?
the champagne?
Yeah, I'm not buying the champagne, but as Erickson said, if I have one guy, like if Jamo gets, 2 catches for 30 yards, whatever, it was going to be a tough mountain to climb regardless. But that is the kind of player I want in a situation like that. A guy who can basically cut that lead down to size with one play.
Yeah. Like, are you like, you got to look at the other side. Like, if you're facing James Williams and you're up by 12, like, how do you feel?
I'd be terrified.
Yes, you are feeling terrified. Before we move on to the next one, Worm, can I just make the point that like Tyjae Spears was a big miss for a lot of analysts preseason, and I had Spears and Pollard ranked like basically next to each other, and I thought it was going to be a split backfield, and that was kind of what Callahan was hinting at in August. But like Spears has looked terrific the last couple of weeks. He has looked really good. Like, we should not forget that this guy is actually a really good running back, and just there is this like crackle of electricity in the air when that guy has the ball in his hands. And like I want to be above consensus on him in my 2025 rankings, and I want to get him on a few teams, even if he is penciled in to be the number 2 back again behind someone else, because like I think he's really good. I want to be invested in Tyjae Spears next year.
Maybe next year's version of how this year you were all over Chase Brown, technically kind of looking like second backfield, second guy in the backfield, but you just believed in the talent. Yep. Whenever I stare at the draft screen and Tyjae Spears is there, I just cannot not think about the report on draft night about him basically like not having one of his knees, like all the ligaments and everything. And well, I forget the specifics of the medical, whatever it is, but like, I just can't not think about that.
I know it's the Jay Ajayi thing. But then again, we did get like 1,700-yard season from Jay Ajayi before he, disappeared into the ether. So maybe we'll get that sort of smash season from Tyjae Spears, and maybe it's a one-off, but I would still want that guy on my roster if it happens.
Spears is awesome. I love watching him run. Let's go to another flex here. Jerry Jeudy or Kendre Miller. Interesting couple of names, given what we've seen from them recently and wherever your expectations may lie for this week. Erickson, who do you prefer for week 17 if you were forced to start one, Kendre Miller or Jerry Jeudy?
I'm not playing Jerry Jeudy with DTR as his quarterback. I mean, we saw this play out. Like, we've seen Jerry Jeudy play with bad quarterbacks his entire career, and it's never good. It's like he needs Winston. and that's it. And then nobody else can make Jerry Jeudy good. So I'm not playing Jeudy. I think Kendre Miller is. I think that people would have more confidence in Kendre if the Saints had just played so bad in that Monday night game. Where I mean, we talked about it last week, Fitz. Where yes, we liked Miller, like his potential, but we recognize this is the worst possible spot for a second-year running back with a rookie quarterback playing on the road in Lambeau Field. Like this is going to be a disaster, and that's exactly how it played out. So this time it's different, right? Like they're playing at home, they're playing against the Las Vegas Raiders. Just we like their defense as a streamable option, but I expect Kendre to do way more than he did against the Green Bay Packers. So that's the way I'm playing it. I'm going to go with Kendre here because I think that he's going to bounce back a little, have a better odds of hitting in this spot versus Jeudy, where I mean we've done this before with bad quarterbacks with him. It just doesn't work. And we know DTR, his favorite target is David Njoku. Like we saw it last week. We've seen it last year. He leaned heavily on David Njoku. And if it's Bailey Zappi, please just stay as far away from Jerry Jeudy as humanly possible.
Fitz, who do you like here?
I echo everything Erickson just said. This is a Kendre Miller call for sure. I think it'll be a better week for him. Maybe not a great week. Maybe it'll be kind of a committee, but it's bound to be better than it was last week in Green Bay. And I think the easiest player prop bet of the entire season was Jerry Jeudy was at like 62.5 yards last year. I was mad after that game ended that I had bet more money on the under for Jerry Jeudy. Like I was like, what were you thinking? Like, why didn't you bet more? That was so obvious. Whatever the under is on Jerry Jeudy this week, I'm probably going to hit it again.
Let's do a quarterback here. Fitz, how about Brock Purdy or Bo Nix this week?
Give me Nix. Give me the quarterback on the playoff-bound team. Nix has thrown multiple touchdown passes in 5 of his last 6 games, and he started running again. There was a span of 4 games where he had 5 or fewer rushing yards in each of those games. Now he's had more than 20 rushing yards in each of the last 2. Plus he gets a matchup against a Falcons defense that has given up the 8th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Atlanta has allowed 28 touchdown passes, tied for 2nd most. Falcons also have the 4th worst opponent passer rating in the league. Great matchup, great spot for Nix. I kind of mentioned it before when we were talking about Jauan Jennings. Like the 49ers are out of the playoffs. Their offense is on kind of a bad trajectory. They've scored 17 or fewer points in like 5 of the last 6, and they aren't going to have Trent Williams at left tackle. So I will take Bo Nix over Brock Purdy pretty confidently.
Erickson?
Fitz, I just wanted to check on. So you said Bo Nix is playing the Bengals, not the Falcons. Were you reading off?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. All right.
Was that all like Bengals stuff, or was that for the Falcons?
That might have been Falcon stuff. I might have had the wrong matchup, so that's bad. Okay. But still, potential shootout against the Bengals. We're excited about the game script against the Bengals. That was a mistake by me.
No, all good. I just wanted to clarify that because I mean, I think the thing to point out too about Bo Nix is when we see him, we see him run more when the Broncos have to push the pedal to the metal, like when they don't get to just steamroll opponents, where it's like, hey, we can play conservative. Let's hand the ball off. Let's have these easy passes for Bo Nix. But then it's like, hey, we're down 14 points. Like, hey, Bo, you got to use your legs, right? You got to make plays if you're not hitting the ball downfield. So, I think that this is probably a spot where you want to go with Bo Nix. Again, he's surpassed all my expectations in terms of what he could do as a fantasy quarterback this year. And when you add in that extra element of, hey, this is a spot where he's probably going to run because it's a game where you're going to see points. I do like Brock Purdy a lot too as a pocket passer, but again, he is limited as a pocket passer, where if he is not running as much as Bo Nix, he may not be able to hit the same type of fantasy football threshold that we can get from a guy like Nix. So I actually had Purdy ranked ahead of Nix. I probably got to move him up.
We almost made it to the end of the very last show of the year without Fitz making a single mistake. We couldn't do it.
Oh, he's made a lot of mistakes. There's none so glaring as that.
Your words, not mine. Tight end, Hunter Henry or Chig Okonkwo this week? Fitz?
Chig. Erickson mentioned it before. He has become Mason Rudolph's go-to guy the last couple of weeks. Over his last 2 games, 21 targets, 17 catches, 140 receiving yards for Chig Okonkwo. And this week he gets the Jaguars, who have given up the 8th most fantasy points to tight ends.
Erickson, Henry, or Okonkwo?
I like both guys. I am going to roll with Henry just because he's been the number 1 target all year long for Drake May. That's the only reason. Just I like the longevity of how he's kind of been Drake May's player more reliable. Chig obviously has been hot as of late, and I still like his matchup, but I've just seen it more from Hunter Henry. It's also a revenge game for Hunter Henry, again, formerly of the Los Angeles Chargers, or at that point, they were the San Diego Chargers. So I like Henry. I do like the Patriots offense a little bit in this game against the Chargers playing at home. A lot of the Patriots home games have been kind of like low-key shootouts. So I think the Chargers are going to score points. And Henry's coming off, I think his probably like one of his best games, like where he finally scored a touchdown after Demario Douglas was ruled incomplete in the end zone. So I think Hunter Henry could score again. And I mean, he's been a top 12 tight end the last 2 of 3 weeks. And he's actually been in the top 10 in 3 of his last 5 games. So Henry for me, but I do like Chig as a streaming option if you don't have Henry available.
Before we get to the touchdown calls contest, just want to congratulate everybody on making it to their league's championship and let you know that we want to hear from you about how we helped you dominate this season. Please take 30 seconds and show us some support by leaving a quick review at fantasypros.com/review and by rating us on Spotify. Obviously, we would prefer nice ratings, but in leaving that review or going to our survey that we talked about earlier in this week on those shows, please let us know how we can improve as well. Like we've said, really all week, we want to put our best foot forward for everybody and help you guys however you feel like we can best help you throughout the season. So we really appreciate everybody listening. If we did help you, we would love a kind review here, fantasypros.com/review and rating us on Spotify. We'll just take a few seconds to do that. We really appreciate everybody sticking with us all season long, and we thank you so much for listening. Guys, let's go out on top here with our touchdown calls contest. I am starting off at running back this week. I'm going with Audric Estime for no reason other than every time I think I know what's going on in this backfield, I'm wrong. He's a player I liked. I'm just going to kind of plant my flag here and say I think he gets into the end zone in what is an intriguing matchup for running backs, and I could easily see him bowling over some Bengals and getting into the end zone. So I'll go with Audric Estime. Erickson, who's your receiver?
How did you not pick Chase Brown as the RB touchdown call, Worm? He was the. This is you're gonna fantasy. I want to see all the reviews, right? Chase Brown season. That's all you got to comment. Chase Brown. did you get to your championship? Chase Brown season. Chase Brown's gonna score this week probably. For me, my wide receiver touchdown call is Davante Adams because that's the only man Aaron Rodgers is looking for when they get anywhere near the end zone. Rodgers' next touchdown pass will be his 500th regular season passing touchdown. I actually put a poll out on Twitter what's a bigger lock this week. Davante Adams catching Aaron Rodgers' 500th passing touchdown, or it not going to Garrett Wilson. So between the two locks, so 60% said Adams is going to catch it, 28% it's not going to be Garrett Wilson. So I'm going to roll with Davante here, catching number 500 from Aaron Rodgers.
Fitz, who do you have at tight end?
Jordan Love's favorite red zone target, Tucker Kraft.
So we've got Audric Estime at running back, Davante Adams at wide receiver, and Tucker Kraft at tight end. Hopefully we are going out strong here with the touchdown calls contest. And hopefully we're going out strong with the start-sit recommendations on the show. Thank you again to everybody for listening all season long. Again, we as a podcast feed are not going anywhere next week. We will still have shows, some stuff built around week 18, some stuff built around kind of an early look ahead to the offseason and maybe even 2025. So we'll be around next week just for kind of different variation of the show. For Fitz and Erickson, it's been a pleasure doing this particular show all season long. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will see you again in a different variation next week and moving forward. But we'll see you again next time. Thanks everybody.